You don't fall into traps because you're weak, you fall into them because you care. A short message appears, casual, harmless, familiar. It pulls on memory, on hope, on the version of yourself that once tried harder. But notice how your body reacts before your mind explains. That tightness is information. Silence from you is not cruelty, it is clarity. You don't owe access to people who only knock when they're bored, lonely, or losing control. Growth means recognizing patterns before they repeat. Power is choosing peace over proving anything. Not every message is meant to reconnect. Some are meant to regain control, and understanding this changes how you see communication forever. When a text arrives unexpectedly, especially from someone who once had emotional access to you, it often carries an unspoken agenda. It may sound polite, caring, or even nostalgic, but beneath the surface, it is frequently testing one thing: whether they still have influence. These messages are rarely about mutual understanding or genuine repair. They are about checking if the door is still unlocked, if you will respond, explain, justify, or re-enter a dynamic that once drained you. Control doesn't always look aggressive. Often it disguises itself as concern. A simple, "I was just thinking about you," can be less about care and more about curiosity over whether you are still emotionally available. The sender may want reassurance that they still matter, that they can still affect your mood, your focus, or your sense of self. This is why the timing of these messages is rarely random. They tend to arrive when you are moving on, growing quieter, or becoming less reactive. Silence from you can feel like a loss of power to someone who once relied on your attention. Reconnection, when healthy, comes with accountability, clarity, and respect for boundaries. A message meant to heal does not confuse you or make you anxious. It does not pull you back into old roles or trigger the urge to explain yourself. Control-based messages, however, often feel vague. They invite you to fill in the gaps, to ask questions, to reopen conversations that never truly went anywhere before. They thrive on ambiguity because ambiguity keeps you engaged. It's important to notice how these messages make you feel rather than what they say. If your first reaction is tension, guilt, or the sudden need to prove that you are doing well, that's a sign the message is about leverage, not connection. People seeking control don't always want you back. Sometimes they just want to know they could have you back if they tried. That knowledge feeds their sense of importance. You are not required to respond just because someone reaches out. Access to you is not automatic, and your growth does not require explanations. Recognizing the difference between genuine connection and control is an act of self-respect. It means trusting your awareness more than the tone of a message. It means understanding that not all doors need to be reopened just because someone knocks softly. When you stop responding out of habit and start responding out of intention, dynamics shift. The power moves back to you, not because you confront or accuse, but because you no longer participate unconsciously. Awareness interrupts cycles. It allows you to pause instead of react, to choose yourself instead of old patterns, and to recognize that true connection never needs to bait, test, or pull you backward to exist. Familiar words can hide the same old manipulation, especially when they come wrapped in softness, humor, or nostalgia. The language feels known because it has been used before, and that familiarity can disarm your awareness. You might recognize the phrases immediately, even if you can't explain why they affect you. They are the words that once made you pause, second-guess yourself, or feel responsible for maintaining the connection. Over time, those words became shortcuts to your attention. Manipulation rarely announces itself clearly. It doesn't say what it wants outright. Instead, it relies on emotional memory. A casual, "Are you okay?" can sound caring, but if it carries no follow-through, no respect for your boundaries, and no accountability for past behavior, it may simply be an invitation to reopen a door you closed for a reason. The words themselves are not harmful. It is the pattern behind them that matters. Patterns repeat because they work. When someone uses familiar language, it can pull you back into an old role without you noticing. You may feel the urge to explain your absence, justify your choices, or soften your boundaries so the other person feels comfortable. That impulse often comes from conditioning, not intention. You were trained subtly to respond in a certain way. Familiar words activate familiar responses, and before you realize it, you are participating in a dynamic you outgrew. True change in communication sounds different. It includes clarity, ownership, and respect for your autonomy. Manipulative familiarity, on the other hand, stays vague. It avoids specifics and leans on emotion rather than responsibility. It may praise you, miss you, or joke with you, but it rarely addresses what actually went wrong. This keeps the focus on feelings instead of facts, which makes it easier to slide back into the same cycle. Your body often recognizes manipulation before your mind does. A sense of unease, pressure, or emotional fog after reading a message is information. Familiar words should not make you feel smaller or confused if they are coming from a healthy place. When they do, it's a sign that the language is being used as a tool rather than a bridge. You are allowed to outgrow conversations that once felt normal. Familiarity is not proof of safety, and history alone does not earn access. As you become more aware, familiar words lose their power to pull you back automatically. You begin to hear them clearly without the old emotional weight attached. In that clarity, manipulation becomes easier to recognize, and choice becomes possible again. Silence is a boundary, not a punishment, even though it is often misunderstood by people who are used to constant access. When you stop responding, it doesn't mean you are being cruel, dramatic, or avoidant. It means you are choosing not to participate in a dynamic that no longer feels safe or respectful. Silence is not about teaching someone a lesson. It is about protecting your energy and maintaining your sense of self. Many people have been conditioned to believe that they owe explanations, replies, and emotional availability at all times. This belief can make silence feel uncomfortable or wrong, especially if you were once praised for being understanding, patient, or accommodating. But constant availability is not the same as kindness. When communication repeatedly leaves you drained, anxious, or doubting yourself, stepping back is not an act of aggression. It is an act of clarity. Those who benefit from your responsiveness may interpret your silence as rejection or control because it disrupts their expectations. They may accuse you of being cold or unfair, but these reactions often reveal more about their need for access than about your character. A healthy connection respects pauses. It does not demand immediate reassurance or emotional labor on command. Silence creates space, and space allows you to hear yourself again. Without the noise of constant messaging, you can notice how you actually feel rather than how you are expected to feel. You can reflect on patterns instead of reacting to them. This is especially important when past communication involved confusion, mixed signals, or emotional pressure. Silence interrupts those cycles by removing the stimulus that keeps them alive. Choosing silence can be uncomfortable at first because it challenges old habits. You might feel guilt, fear of misunderstanding, or the urge to fill the quiet. These feelings are normal, especially if you were once rewarded for over-explaining or smoothing things over. But discomfort does not mean you are doing something wrong. Often it means you are doing something new. A boundary does not require agreement to be valid. You do not need permission to step back. Silence is one of the clearest boundaries because it speaks through action rather than argument. It removes the opportunity for manipulation, debate, or emotional bargaining. There is no opening for words to be twisted or intentions to be questioned. Over time, silence teaches you discernment. You learn who respects your space and who tries to push past it. You begin to see which connections are built on mutual respect and which relied on your constant presence. In that awareness, your sense of power returns quietly, without confrontation, because you are no longer available for dynamics that cost you your peace. Awareness breaks patterns before they repeat, and this is where real change begins. Patterns don't usually announce themselves loudly. They develop slowly through repetition, familiarity, and emotional habit. You don't notice them at first because they feel normal. The same types of conversations, The same emotional reactions, the same outcomes play out again and again until one moment of awareness interrupts the cycle. That moment doesn't come from overthinking, it comes from seeing clearly. When you become aware, you start noticing details you once overlooked. You notice how certain messages arrive only when someone needs reassurance, attention, or control. You notice how interactions leave you feeling unsettled rather than supported. Awareness allows you to connect the dots between behavior and impact, not just words and intention. It shifts your focus from what people say to how their presence affects your inner state. Patterns survive on unconscious participation. As long as you respond automatically, explain reflexively, or doubt your own perceptions, the cycle continues. Awareness gives you the pause between stimulus and response. In that pause, you regain choice. You can decide whether engaging aligns with who you are now rather than who you were when the pattern began. This is not about blame, it's about responsibility to yourself. Once you see a pattern, you can't unsee it. The same messages no longer feel innocent. The same behaviors no longer feel confusing. Instead of asking, "What do they mean?" you begin asking, "How does this affect me?" That shift is powerful because it centers your experience rather than someone else's intentions. You stop minimizing your reactions and start trusting them as signals. Awareness also brings grief. You may realize how long you stayed in cycles that cost you peace, time, or self-trust. You may wish you had known sooner, but awareness is not meant to punish you for the past. It is meant to free you in the present. Every moment of clarity is a step away from repetition and a step toward alignment. As awareness grows, your responses change naturally. You don't need dramatic confrontations or explanations. You simply engage less where there is no reciprocity. You choose distance where there is confusion. You choose silence where there is manipulation. These choices don't come from anger. They come from understanding. Breaking patterns doesn't require changing other people. It requires changing your level of awareness. When you see clearly, you move differently. Old triggers lose their grip because you recognize them for what they are. In that recognition, repetition ends, not with force, but with quiet certainty and self-respect. Every message you receive is an invitation, not an obligation. When you learn to read beyond the words and listen to your body, your patterns, and your peace, you stop confusing familiarity with safety. Growth is not about hardening your heart. It is about strengthening your discernment. You don't need to explain your silence, justify your boundaries, or revisit dynamics that once diminished you. Awareness, clarity, and self-respect change the way you move, the way you respond, and the way you protect your energy. When you choose yourself consistently, traps lose their power, patterns lose their hold, and your life begins to feel like your own again. And that is the moment you truly step into your freedom.